Hey folks, I'm going to do a little kind of breakout video on what I'm doing on the VFR, which will be in a separate video regarding trying to correct the carburetor issues. I think I've got it corrected, and again, that'll be in a different video where I have it all back in, and I haven't fired it up yet because, you know, while this thing's all apart here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm shotgunning the coils, because a couple of coils do, actually all of them, on the primaries on the coils do fall higher in the resistance than the resistance measurement rather than the the specs call for. Although it's interesting that the secondaries with and without the if you test them with or without the high tension lead, you know, the actual spark plug lead, these guys are normal. So yeah, you know, I know it's kind of like loading a parts cannon and yelling fire, but this is the time to do it. I'm not going to put it all back together to get it to a point where I can take it for a ride, because getting at these coils back here for the number 1 and number 3 cylinder, I have to pull the gas tank back off. So, you know, might as well just get it all done right now. So the reason why I'm doing this video is I found something pretty interesting. Yeah, okay. There he goes. Where are you? Are you playing with your squeaky bone again? What a good boy. So like I was saying, the reason why I'm doing this is I found something interesting regarding these coils that I wanted to show you. Because if you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to swap out the spark plug leads, high tension leads, whatever you want to call them, you know, with the new material, because the old ones are stiffer than, you know, Peter North on, oh, I already did that joke 100 times. Never mind. They're stiff. So... yeah, so we're going to use all the new materials, but the spark plug caps, these guys here, they have to be reused, because, you know, you have a very deep spark plug hole. It's deep. And so, but these are a little different, actually quite different than what I'm used to seeing. So that's what I wanted to do the video for, to show you that difference. So what we're going to do first is going to go over to Dad's old bench, our DOB. And we're going to take a look at what you typically see as far as the spark plug caps, or the spark plug, you know, ends where the leads go into. And then I'll show you what we have on these and what you need to do. All right, so this is the VFR750 stock coil and stock lead. And we don't need anything from here up to here. We do need this cap. We'll get to that here in a second. Well, now what you typically see on the the across the frame 4-cylinder and other types of the older motorcycles are a cap just like this. They will generally say like NGK or something like that on it, and these are resistor caps. So there's a 5 kilo ohm resistor built into these caps that I believe at the time the reason why is because they weren't speccing or using resistor plugs. So, you know, anything with the R in it is a resistor plug. So the stock plugs, like on a KZ1000, I forgot the exact number, but it's a 4-character spark plug number without the R. So let me see if I have one, and I can better explain it. This one here is a BR8ES, all right, BR8ES, and the stock older plugs would be just simply the B8ESs. So Bravo 8 Echo Sierra. They're very, very difficult to find. I don't believe NGK is making these anymore. The last time I checked a while back, they were super hard to find. Everything's in the resistor format now. So what you have to consider when you do these things, and you're doing like an ignition conversion or something, or replacing coils either with OEM or aftermarket, is if you have resistor plugs, typically you don't need to use the resistor caps, because you got a resistor on a resistor and you may have a decrease in energy to your spark plug. So when that happens, what you do at that point is you go to the aftermarket, and these are NGK, let's see, they're called spark plug covers, of course, but LZFH 8381s black, all right? And that's what they look like. They're a little physically smaller than the old style caps, but they work just fine. And these probably smaller because they don't have resistors. All right, so you have the same end that snaps onto, see if we can zoom up on that with a little bit of a light. And you see they have the same end with the part that, you know, goes over the stem on the top of the nut, not one of those caps that screws on or one of those nipples that screws on. All right, so they're the correct ones for that. But if you don't need to use a resistor plug, you can go with these guys right here. Now the feature I'm going to point out in particular, which makes this really easy to swap out either just, you know, the caps, the spark plug wires, or both, is the end right here where you have these screws that are built into it. It looks like a wood screw. All right, and what that does is it just lets you screw the wire into the end of the cap, and then that's how it fixes itself to the center terminal. All right, it's pretty simple technology, and it works really well. And so, you know, that's typically what you see. This is, I think, another one off of a Suzuki. I brought this out because it's going to be similar to what we're going to be dealing with this. All right, but not 100%, because likewise on the spark plug wire end, this has a screw too, or also, all right, where you just simply screw in a new wire to it and make sure you put the little cover caps that go on them. Typically they look like this, to cap them off. The same on these. In fact, that's what this is for here. So you have that cap, you have that cap, your wire goes in after you screw it in, you slide that on, and it's all good. And of course there's stock ones for this. So again, you have 5 kilo ohm and non 5 kilo ohm caps, and so you have to decide what you want to use, you know, on your particular application. So let's move to the VFR now. So now that you got a little background on that, the stock plug on a VFR, according to the Circus manual, is a DPR9 or a DPR8 EA. And in Nipodenso, this is the number, okay? But this is, I use NGK, so I'm using the DPRs, all right? So it's definitely a resistor plug, even back in '86 that they were speccing out for it. Unless the service manual is updated after the fact, I don't know, but that looks like an ancient service manual. I'd call it right. And so this is basically this is a 7, but it's a good example, DPR7EA. I'm not sure why I have these, but the way NGK does it, and these are NGK plugs, of course, is opposite of what you'd expect. Normally you'd say the higher the number, the hotter the plug, and NGK is the other way around. The lower the number, the hotter the plug. And you can look up hot and cold plugs. I'm not going to go into that on probably a billion different YouTube videos or other forums and things like that. But that's how NGK does it. So you have to kind of remember that if you're going to change the heat range of the plug. So anyway, let's get back to the VFR situation at hand. So again, I'm going to replace the coil, replace the lead, but I'm going to reuse this. Now I took a look at this and I was like, you know, usually they're the type that screws in, you know, even like this one with the screw, just unscrew them and all good, but it doesn't work that way on these. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you in this video. These are completely something I haven't run into before, but easily overcome with just a regular soldering gun and a little bit of time and good quality or good practice techniques, and you can reuse that no problem. Okay, so typical to some other plugs that I come to find, like this one, if you look down deep inside there, you see you have some sort of a, you know, copper or brass piece with looks like a screwdriver slot, and that little piece in there is where the end of the spark plug goes into. There's a little springy piece, probably some sort of spring steel, like high carbon steel, that when you push down on the tip of the spark plug and you hear it go zzz, that's what it grabs into. You're like, ugh, well, this one's kind of tight otherwise, but there'll be a little thing that holds into the spark plug to keep that, you know, this tip onto that terminal or that location inside there. So I noticed that on the VFR has the same thing. And you can see it has down in there, it's got a little screwdriver slot, all right? So I started yanking on this thing and ended up breaking the first one, but I was able to recover from it. I'll show you what I mean here, because I wasn't sure how these worked. So to do the VFR ones and typical ones, and like this, of course, this is screw in, but it's a little, you know, if you needed to get inside here, to, for example, deal with the internal resistor, then you just stick your screwdriver in, and these aren't even that tight. I already done the rear as I showed you, but you know, these front ones, I'm sorry, the inside ones on those weren't tight at all. And it's only really a couple of threads, and then this thing will come out. So you get it up to the end like this, you just get it up, and then you deal with it. All right, you get it up to the end. You can take a pair of needle dicks and get in here and pull it out. carefully. You don't want to lose this. This is probably irreplaceable. Come on. Now inside there, what you're going to find is you're going to find that little piece, and you can see those the little tangs right there that look like a little piece of metal with little hooks on, almost like a C-clip. And that's what I'm talking about. That grabs onto the tip of the spark plug. So when you hear it go zip, you know, push down like little clicks, that's what it's grabbing onto, all right? So you also have a spring in here. Don't lose the spring if it has one. And what you do at this point, just set it aside. And inside here also, there's going to be a resistor. Now I took it out and I go, oh, that's got to be a resistor. And I metered up the two on the rear for the 2 cylinders, and they're definitely 5 kilo ohm as well. Roughly, like one's 4.81, the other one's like 5.2. So I'm sure they're supposed to be 5 kilo ohm. All right, so we'll set that aside as well. Now we're to the point where we can get in here and do some stuff. So if you take a look down in there, you see there's, you don't really see anything except where, you know, a piece of metal where that, or some sort of contact where that, what is it called, a resistor goes up against, and obviously the spring pushes it up against this. So how do you get this out? All right, what I come to find is, first thing we need to do is get this insulation out of the way. I'm not going to reuse this cable, so I'm just going to cut it off and get it out of the way. And then we're going to slide the cap back, and I'll expose what's inside there and bring it out this way and show you what you got to do to deal with it. The kit comes with, I'll show you the kit here in a minute, but the kit that I bought from Rick's Motorsports Electrics comes with you know, the spark plug wire itself and the protector around it that I just cut off of here, you know, the whatever you want to call it, the sheath. Anyway, you can see these are labeled by number too, which is nice, but I don't really need to deal with that because I already know what number they go on. But this is obviously number 4 cylinder. Now what we want to do is we want to push this up through and kind of wiggle it around and get that end to come out. Because of this angle here, it wants to jam into that piece of metal inside where that thread goes into for that end, but it will come out. All right. Once you pull it out, you end up with the end of the spark plug wire and this little dome-shaped deal on top of it, which is clearly soldered on the end of the spark plug lead. So this is only going to work with copper spark plug wire. So if you're going to put graphite in, you're out of luck, unless you come up with some other way to do it. These copper core spark plug leads are the only ones that are going to work, and luckily that's what came in this kit. All right. What this is a little like button that's got a hole in it ultimately when you desolder it, that the new wire is going to stick through. And what they did was they took this, probably made out of copper, maybe brass, and what they did was they put this button on, slid it, it has a hole in the middle, slid it over just a little bit of the wire sticking through, maybe 2 millimeters worth, and then they bent the wires over, like smushed them over, and then they dribbled some solder on here to kind of dome it up. That way it looks that way, and you have a nice high contact point for the for this resistor. All right, so when I did the other two, I made sure I built up enough solder so it pretty much looked the same, where these go like that inside there with the spring pressure on it, right? So all you got to do is just desolder it. So I'll do that here on the side. I showed you this little vise where I got from up there that was between the garage doors of the old house, and it just I think I'm going to use it this way as a temporary vise for small objects like this. It works really well. And just clamp that wire in there. And what we can do is we can desolder it. And remember, the wires are smushed underneath that solder. So you got to kind of loosen it up and wiggle it. And sometimes you can get those wires to stand up as they kind of bend under the heat, and then snip them off and then pull it the rest of the way. And if there's still a hole left in it, you know, you can reheat it and kind of tap it. The solder will come out of it. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll get the thing desoldered. This is part number 106. I think it has some other digits to it on the website, but if you go on Rick's Motorsports Electrics, if you want one of these, that's going to be the number you're going to be looking for, at least in part, on their website. All right. And what comes in that, of course, is the coil, and this is an exact direct fit. There's no modifications necessary to the mounting. It's exactly the same. Well, not quite. It's one of these deals where you have a smaller male terminal and a larger one, but you don't have to mess with the terminals that comes with it unless you want to. The OEM terminals, even though it's a little larger, they go on that real solid. On the rear ones, I found that was the case, so I'm not going to worry about it. If necessary, you need to just cut off and recrimp the smaller one on. I don't want to modify the OEM wiring, so I'm just going to go that route. So again, you got a coil, you got your lead, and you've got the cap that goes on the coil side to seal this end off. And of course, this coil has got one of those little screw dealies, so you don't have to worry about screwing around with this thing in some unusual format or methodology, because you do have that little screw type that I was describing before, where the wire is just going to screw into it. So they give you enough length of wire where you can cut it down to whatever you need, and this of course is the insulation or the sheathing that goes over it, the protection. We'll take that condom off for now. We'll get this out of the way, and we want to deal with the business end of the spark plug side, because that's going to be a little bit more time consuming and challenging on this. All right, so to do that, we need to take this off the wire so we can essentially set our OEM coil aside, except we're going to need that metal bracket off of it. This is for the fronts. Get that later. And now what you have is you have a spark plug cap. Give it an inspection, make sure it's not torn or anything. And it has that metal like tube inside of it that's got the threads that take this guy here, and it's got a little shoulder inside there. It's really hard to see, but there's a small shoulder inside there that when, I probably can't even see it, but when you put this wire back in with the little cap on it, all right, and you drag it through, it'll bottom on that shoulder, because obviously this has to be fixed in some way, because there's a little spring pressure from that thing pushing against it via the resistor cap, or resistor rather. So what you want to do is make sure that you're reusing these, and if you lose this, you can certainly make one, but you're just going to have to take another one and get some accurate measurements. I believe this is about 8mm diameter, because I measured it up yesterday, because I temporarily lost one. Fell under the DOB here, but I did find it and reused it. But it's just a little piece that looks like brass, like that. But yeah, so what we're going to do now is explain this order of operations, and this is a really good example of an order of operations job, because you got to do things in a certain step, otherwise it ain't going to work out right. So what I'm going to do, number one, is I'm going to strip this back. We're going to clamp it up in a little vise over here, just like we took it off. We're going to slip this over, mush it over, and we're going to resolder it and get a nice little dome of solder on top of there. And once that's done, we can reinsert it into the plug, but we have to reinsert it from the bottom in first, the spark plug side first. Shove it through, and have it come through, and then it'll bottom on that little lip or little shoulder inside there. That's where it stops, and then we can continue putting it together. The reason why I'm mentioning is you just don't want to skip the step where you attach it to the spark plug before you even put this protection on it, these condoms, which I did twice. And but it's easy, you can just unscrew it from here. That's the beauty of it, because it's got that little screw just like I showed you before. I mean, it would be a hell of a lot easier if it was just a cap like this, of course, but this, you have to kind of do a classic reach around to get down to your spark plug, because they're so deep in the spark plug holes on this engine. And the VF750 is the same way, and I don't think I have the original caps or the plug-ins for that one, but that's why you can use stick coils with those, because they go down so far. And I would use stick coils on this if I could find them that with the right resistance, but I can't find them that are the correct impedance, the resistance rating for this particular application. I have looked and looked and looked, and I've bought a bunch of different ones off Fleabay, and even though somebody might put in there that they're 2.5 ohm or 2.8 ohm or something, they're not. They're like every one of them is like 1.6 ohm or even 1 ohm. We can't do that. All right. So let's strip this back, get it mounted up in the hull. We'll solder it up, and then we can insert it. We can shove it. Now I found you can use either end, but I found if you strip it back about 3 mil or so is about right, and then there's enough stick out so you can shove it, and it's long enough. Being long enough is always good. If you strip it too much and it's too long, you just cut it back, so it's not a big deal. That's mo better. See? About that long. This hole, I think, is a little bit soldered up to get it over the wire here, so on off camera I'm going to hold this with the pliers and kind of heat it and tap it and see if we can get the rest of this solder off. You can do it any way you want. If you're going to hit it with some compressed air or something while it's hot, which I've done before as well, just wear safety squints because you don't want any hot solder going in your eyes. The other thing you can do is, if it doesn't want to let go and clear the hole, is just hold it with a pair of needle dicks and just heat it up and slip it over, and it pushes through the solder, which is what I just ended up doing because it just didn't want to clear, and that's fine. So what I did here, of course, you can see I smushed over the rest of the wire. I kind of like to spread it out. Spread out! Just kind of even it out. It just makes the solder dome a little easier to form. I don't think you have to be all that anal with it, but I don't mean to overcomplicate stuff, but when do I ever do that? All right, she's ready to go. I'm going to put a little soldering paste flux on. Just a dabble, do ya? Just a tip and just for a second. And then we're going to start building this up and make a little dome like it was before. I don't think it has to be perfect, but there's a reason why they shaped it that way. And again, I think it's so the resistor makes good solid contact, because if it was irregular and the wires were kind of a little bit proud of the solder as it cures, hardens, it's an irregular surface, you may have a high spot in there where you're not getting good contact. So I think they wanted as solid contact as possible. Where is the solder? I'm getting really low on solder. It reminds me of that scene out of the movie Used Cars from 1980 with Kurt Russell. I love that movie, where Lenny and Squiggy were in that one, and Lenny goes, oh, I gotta get to Radio Shack, I gotta get before they close, I gotta get some rosin core solder. I'm thinking to myself, boy, I wish they were still around. We got a piece of crap there. Let's fix that little piece of crap. I think it was a piece of the not the insulation, but the strain relief part of that center core. I didn't see that. Oh yeah, that's much better. I mean, you could hit it with a file if you wanted to afterwards, a little file, but that's going to be good. As long as the tip is proud there and it's got a pretty good regular surface to seat against that that thing. I might touch that up a little bit because this one gave me a little bit of trouble with that spot, but that's really all you need to do. So get out of there. Yeah, it's just kind of like a little dome there, a little irregular, but like I said, we can work that in with a little file here if necessary, and then make it really nice if we want to. It's not a big deal. This one, like I said, just came out a little less pretty than the other ones, but being that I'm a perfectionist, we'll go ahead and do her real quick and make sure it's nice and round at the tip there, where it gives us a nice platform or surface for that resistor to go against. Yeah, it's looking good already. Solder is so forgiving because it's soft. Perfect. So that's what we're going with right there. Focus. Yeah, we're going to go with that. It's fine. Good enough. So that's that end. While we're in here, we'll take a look at this resistor. It's simply a doodad, a little thinner in the center, which I was. And then this piece of rubber that goes around it, which essentially just keeps it centered inside. What do I do with it? Keeps it centered inside this guy here. So it goes in and this centers it, because that hole is bigger than the major diameter of the actual resistor itself. But the end's a little corroded. I found on each of them it's the same thing. So I'm hitting them with a wire wheel, and then I'm hitting them with that little file, and then making sure that they're nice and clean. Then we'll start reassembling this. So just one more time for the sake of confusion, this is how it would be inside there. So you want this surface to be a nice solid contact instead of something irregular. So that's what we've achieved here, all right? Okay, as I said before, order of operations. The next, you could shove this through here if you want and have it sticking out and do that kind of work, or and then just pull it right back in. That's fine. But it either 6 of one, half dozen the other. It works the same way. So we're going to end up pushing it through is this way. All right, so this comes in and then bottoms on that little shoulder, as I mentioned inside. So I like to put a little silicone, Oh, okay, drop on the floor, why don't you? Kind of like the Astro Glide of mechanics and so forth. And then we're going to start shoving it. And this is dielectric, according to the container that I just dropped. So, if the little gets on that area inside there, it's not going to be a problem. So this is kind of tricky. On the other ones I noticed, you kind of wiggle it around and it'll make it past. And because remember, it's got those little threads in there and some other features of this, I don't know, this metal piece that's either glued or pressed in or whatever it is in there. Then we pull it through, keep it nice and straight. All right, and then we just bring it in till she stops. And when she stops, she's up against that shoulder in there. And again, you have to have that, otherwise the spark plug wire would move away from where that spring tension is supposed to push against that resistor. So when it's done, that's what it looks like down deep inside. And you can see that spot. And we're ready to reassemble the rest of it, which is pretty simple. I mean, this is all cleaned up, ready to go. We shove this guy in, shove it. And make sure it goes down in all the way. And of course it's not. Get in there, you. Go home. You know you want to go home. And we take this guy with the spring and make sure that that's all clean, which it is. The ends are pretty good shape. It was just that inner part that was a little bit rusted. Take our scroll driver and capture the slot. Give it a tightening. And now when we look down there, we're right back where we started. And it's nice and solid, and it's in good shape. We got a new lead on it. I have to just measure it up to the original one as far as length goes, and I usually add about a 1/2 inch to make sure that I don't screw it up. And at that point, I'll put the insulation on it. Cut it a little bit short because you need a little bit of room to get the cap. You have to shove the cap up a little bit on the lead, and then screw it into the coil, and then put the cap back on. So you want to leave yourself a little bit of room there, okay? All right, so yeah, that's pretty cool. That's what I wanted to show you. So that concludes our little breakout video. And again, there'll be another video on the actual work on the bike as far as the carbs go. I'm pretty sure I found the problem. And if it is the problem, it's something I did, as I kind of suggested in an earlier video. But you'll have to watch that video to see. So don't just repair, restore. Thanks for watching. Catch you on next video.